Welcome. Oh my God, that was horrible. Welcome back, books besties. I have been asked to do a video about beginner-friendly dark romance books, and let me tell you, these are my favorite videos to make. I will make them every single time, and my recs are going to change every single time depending on where I'm at in my life. But today I have, let's see. Today I have all these books with me on what I recommend, and it goes even further than this. Hold on, let's see if I can pick it up. So yes, these are all the books that I have with me today to go over as beginner-friendly dark romance books. So how did I get into dark romance? I feel like this matters. Okay, I started off reading with Colleen Hoover. One day I was watching TikTok as a normal TikTok watcher, not even a BookTok watcher, and I started seeing videos about Colleen Hoover, and it was like girls reading books, and Colleen Hoover was this, XYZ, and I was like, are we reading? Like at my age.
I'm old! Oh, I'm like the Crypt Keeper!
I think I was like 29. Hadn't read a book since high school or college, and I was like, are we reading books? Like, I think the last thing I read for fun was 50 Shades of Grey, like years ago. Like that's cool, but like I did not realize like this is what we were doing. And so I went to Costco one day, and there's like a section, they have the book section, and I look at Ryan and I was like, hey, I want to go look at the books. And I remember him specifically being like, are you gonna read?
What the hell?
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know, the girlies on TikTok are reading, like I want to be a girly that reads. And so I went and I looked, and I was like, all I know is the author's name, Colleen Hoover. And so I looked and I saw the book Maybe Someday, and so I grabbed it and I was like, this isn't the one I was looking for, but like we're gonna give it a shot. And so like obviously since then I am not in my Colleen Hoover era anymore, but I think I read like 12 books from her, like back to back to back to back. Like I was just like, as soon as I was feeling like I was end of the book, I was already ordering another one. I remember there being like a hurricane. I think it was like the end of August I started reading, and I read Maybe Someday. I read Verity, which is like still such a crazy book to me, like still think about that book. I read Ugly Love. I read It Ends With Us. It Starts With Us. Like all the books I probably, like I said, read at least 12. November 9th, I really liked that book. But anyway, like I remember there being a hurricane that was coming, and I was like, I need to buy books. And I got like 5 books to prepare for the hurricane, because at the time I didn't have a Kindle, didn't even really know like if I was gonna be a Kindle girly. And the last thing I wanted to do was not read. And I was just obsessed, like eating it up. And so from there, I ended up going to like, I want to say it was maybe It Happens One Summer by Tessa Bailey. May have been the first one. That or the Knock 'Em Out series, the very first things we never got over. And it was my first time being like, oh, we don't fade to black. We like open door romance. And don't get me wrong, I had read 50 Shades of Grey, but like 50 Shades of Grey is like very specifically like dom sub romance, and it's not even done the way that like I like to read it now. So like I don't know, like I block that world out. But yeah, and then I started realizing I like spice. Then I read the Twisted series, and that should have been my key that I would have been a dark romance girly. So like if you have read the Twisted series already, think of Christian Harper. Like he ended up being my favorite. Like how that man, I don't know, somebody's commented and was like, he could step on my throat and I would say thank you. And I'm like, that's actually the only way to respond. There is something about Christian Harper, and reading that series and seeing like between Alex, Reese, Josh, and Christian, and me falling in love with Christian the most, that should have been my awakening of like, I like dark romance. Like Christian, the way he handled Stella's stalker, like his obsession over her, the way that he like kept tabs on her and borderline stalked her, but in the romance way, not the bad way. Anyway.
Cool. No doubt.
Long story short, if you have not read that series already, highly recommend just reading it, just to see like if that would be like the ultimate like tip your toe in. And if you read Christian Harper and you're like, the way he handles things is ridiculous, I don't like that, I don't like anything about any of that, then you could hard stop here, because like that it just gets worse from there. But if you read that and you're like, intrigue, we can move forward. If you haven't read it yet and you don't care, you're like, Jess, I actually don't care. I want to see your other recs, then we're here for it. Let's go. So I want to start off by saying I used to be like this. Before I was a book talker, I literally went from Twisted Lies to H.G. Carlton. One of her books, or actually two of her books, will be included in here, but a lot of people talk about Haunting Adeline, and I did read Haunting Adeline. That might have been like my second dark romance book. I got thrown right in the deep end, and I think a lot of people find it funny to then throw other people in the deep end because they got thrown in the deep end. They didn't really know, they enjoyed it, whatever the case may be. When I read Haunting Adeline, I had two friends at the time that I was like, read these books, because like, oh my gosh, and like, because I realized I like the dark romance side, but like, I love Haunting Adeline for the like fact that Zaid loves Addie so fully. Like, what Addie went through in Haunting Adeline, how Zaid found her, like how he had her take back her strength, how he just like full on obsessed with this woman. Like, there's something about it. And I've also talked about, like, for me, I used to have a stalker back in the day. Anytime I heard the word stalker, I would think of my own. But after reading Haunting Adeline, I was able to go back into a space where there is a stalker and like take it back and have a completely different outcome. And now when I hear the word stalker, I think of it Zaid Meadows, not my own. And that's something empowering. That's something that came back to me. And I feel like a lot of women that read dark romance, and men, like, you don't have to. Like, you don't have to have gone through a horrific experience to, like, relate to dark romance. But there is something to be said about the FMCs and the MMCs in these books being able to get the revenge and the outcome that we all deserve and will never get. Like, the world we live in is harsh. It is hard. These things are happening. These themes are happening. But the ending of these books are normally not happening. That's not what we get. That's not the side we see. We normally see something drastically different. So being able to enter these triggers in a safe space that at any point you can close that book. It is over. Like, you are done. You are safe. You are grounded. But you have the opportunity to open the book and re-enter this space and come out with like something more empowering for you. Is huge. Like, that's a huge moment. And I feel like the dark romance community gets such a negative connotation of like, you're dark, you're creepy, you're weird. And it's like, I don't want that in my real life. Like, I don't want a stalker, a kidnapper. Like, none of that's real. None of that is what I want. But there is something, like, there's a place for it in the community. And like, if you find yourself getting a little bit too down that rabbit hole, please ground yourself. Please pull yourself back. Like, I think it's important to break up your dark romance, like if you find yourself spiraling. But if you have a good mental ground, like, you're good to go. So I hate the negative connotation this space gets for dark romance community. But what I'm going with, I think a lot of it is because we're throwing people in the deep end when we shouldn't be. I think there's something to be said about like easing people in, because if you throw them with Haunting Adeline, they might be like, what in the actual fuck?
What the is going on?
Right? So I'm glad to make this video. I love making this video. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, for the very first series I do want to talk about, do I think this is dark romance? Not necessarily, but do I think that this is such a good series to start with if you're trying to play with what you're interested in? Abso-freaking-lutely. Like, I wish at the beginning of my reading journey, I had read this sooner. I think I read this probably a year and a half in. It's been a year and a half now since I've read this. Actually, I think it's almost been 2 years since I've read this series, but it's the Salacious Players Club by Sarah Kate. And there's actually more. There's Highest Bidder and Madam, and she might even have another one, but I read this for when like it was available, and since then more has come out and I just haven't picked it up yet. But this series is about a group of friends that own a sex club. And essentially why I think it's important to read this series is I knew nothing. Like, I know nothing in the sexual world when I started reading. Like, I just know the basics. I think it's very interesting to read this series because it's going to teach you a lot of different things, a lot of different themes, a lot of just things to know that then you can say, okay, I liked this book because this was dom sub. I liked Praise because there's an age gap. It's ex-boyfriend's father and her are together. There's a 20-year age gap. He's a dom, she's a sub. they are together, like whatever the case may be. I like that theme. I like that theme because of the age gap. I liked it because of the dom sub. Anyway, whatever reason you liked Praise, now you know when you're looking for new books, like that's something you like, or maybe it's something you don't. Maybe I don't like age gap. That's a way too big of an age gap. I don't like that. That's a little bit taboo. That's not for you. So like you can learn that. Then the next book is Eyes on Me. This one's even more taboo. So it's going to be another age gap, but not as big. It is stepbrother, stepsister. And he's a voyeur, so he likes to watch people when they're doing their little escapades. She likes to be watched, so she's an expeditionist. So I learned these words that I like didn't really know what they were beforehand, but then you learn a little bit of taboo. So I learned that with this one, I can do step siblings, like taboo. I didn't mind this book. I like this book. I did find it a little odd when he's older and she's younger and they know each other as step siblings when she's still younger, even though he doesn't live in the house. So like, you have to find the line of like what you're okay with taboo, but you're gonna see more in that. So then there's Eyes on Me. Then there's Give Me More, which is a couple. They've been married like literally high school sweethearts or college sweethearts, whatever the case may be. They've been married this entire time, only with each other, haven't really like explored. Again, this friend is a co-owner of the sex club. But they have a best friend as well, and he's always hanging out with them. They're always together. The three of them are just always together, and they get to a point where she, the wife, and the husband kind of decide, like, what if we bring him in the mix? Like, what if we love him as well? And so it's not just like, hey, a one-night stand thing. It's like, let's bring him into the relationship so you can see what a throuple looks like, and whatever the case may be. And like, if you're kind of into more of a why choose situation, this will be something that kind of like introduces you to that without being like, hey, there's 6 men and 1 woman. What the heck is happening? So that's a good one. And then Mercy is actually the boyfriend from book 1, is now dating his dad's friend. She's the only woman that's a co-owner of the sex club. He's now going to date her. Like they fill out like a questionnaire, and for some reason it pairs the two together because she's the dom and he's a sub, and that's why he didn't work out with the girlfriend from the first book, because she's also a sub mentality. So you have now female dom, male sub. A lot of like edging and stuff like that happens in this book, so you get to learn like maybe I'm more into a female dom versus a male dom or whatever the case may be. So I really highly recommend this series. And then I think Madam is very much, she is dom. Like we meet her, like whoever the FMC for Madam, we see her a lot in these books. She's so dom. And then Highest Bidder, he's like grandpa daddy. Like we see him in these books as well, but he's like 50 something and like very rich and apparently very handsome. So I think that's his book. So that would be, I'm guessing, another kind of age gap. Anyway, so again, not like dark, but like very much smutty and eye-opening. So I really think if you're trying to kind of like branch out of that like sweetsy romance, start with that first, just to kind of even see if you're even interested in that kind of play, because you're going to see those themes start to bleed into dark romance pretty heavily. Okay, another one to start off with, Hawk by Jessie Hall. This one was categorized as a dark romance, and I didn't see why until like the last little bit of the book. This one, I would say there's a difference between the dark romance being in the romance, like the stalking, the kidnapping, all that stuff, degrading is happening in the romance, like he does the things, versus there's darkness outside of the romance. Like the characters go through dark themes themselves, like maybe they were kidnapped or they were stalked, not by the MMC or not by the FMC. So Hawk, this one's such a great book. Like he's just such a great boyfriend. His name's Cameron Hawk. He goes to prison. He comes out of prison and he goes to stay at his house that he owns. But since he's been in prison, he like kind of rented that back out to his best friend. And the book starts from the best friend's girlfriend's point of view. So she's living there with her like soon to be fiance, or maybe they're already engaged. And they've been living in this house. She hears some noise in now the guest bedroom, and she walks in. She's like, what's happening in my house? Opens the door, and there's a man just like going to town on this girl on the bed. And she's like, why is there somebody in my house right now?
Who the hell is this guy?
Well, it turns out her boyfriend or fiance, Trash, never even told her that the guy that actually owns the house is out of prison now, and he's coming to live with them. So like, we already hate the boyfriend because like what the heck, but then the boyfriend keeps leaving her, like going on trips, going on whatever in the case may be. So now she's a writer that works from home, and now Cameron is out of prison and he's home alone. So like they're hanging out together, they start watching movies together, they like kind of like start share stories. So you have the cheating trope in here, so like that's a little bit of a different trope, but it's cheating amongst the characters, so like we're rooting for them. But then by the end of the book, there is a little bit of dark themes that are happening like between the characters, so you get a little bit of insight. This is such a like so light in the dark romance, so I think this is a really good choice if you want to kind of like, again, tip your toe, kind of like Twisted Lies, but even less. I would say Twisted Lies is actually darker than Hawk, but here we are. Okay, Butcher and Blackbird, highly recommend this. I also heard the audiobook is really good. I just finished Slither and Lark. I love that audiobook, so if Butcher and Blackbird is anything like that, let's go. I love very good banter between characters. This one is about two serial killers. They meet up, and every year they have a game. They don't share each other's names. They meet up one time and they say, okay, every year on this exact date, let's meet up in an area where we know there is someone in that area that is a giant piece of trash that the world could be better off without. And we'll kind of have a competition of who can murder him first, okay? And so it goes year over year over year, and the book is following like from that viewpoint. And every now and then you get a little bit of what they're doing in between the years, but like you'll notice that they like kind of fall in love over these years. I think it's like a 5-year thing. I think that's the timeline. But they are funny about it. So like I'm not a horror person. I will never be a horror person, but this is funny. Like they are funny together. The banter is good. Rowan's really funny. She's really funny. I think her name's Sloane. Like it's humorous. Like it's dark romance comedy. So like you get to then again, the dark romance is outside of them. Like the darkness is the fact that they are serial killers together. But they make it fun. So like this is such a fun read. I'm sure it's an even better listen. I told people that I hadn't listened to it. I had read it and they were very upset. They're like, Jess, you have to listen to this. So one day I will. But this is also the first romance book I gave to my husband to read, because I was like, he might like the fact that they're serial killers. He'll like the humor, like whatever the case may be. And he actually really, really enjoyed this book. So highly recommend Butcher and Blackbird. Woo! Okay, next is Lights Out by Navessa Allen. This is another, like, please don't read this book, listen to the audiobook. It's done by Jacob Morgan. He does a fantastic job at just, like, bringing this character to life. This is one where the darkness is within the romance. Like, the MMC starts to stalk her, breaks into her house, that kind of thing. But he is funny about it. So again, you're now moving into another, what I call a dark romance comedy, but you're moving from the darkness being outside of the couple to now it's introduced into the couple. So he wears a mask, he gets into her house, he like jumps into her car one day, like when she wasn't expecting it. But like his internal dialogue is so funny that you're just laughing along with him, and you're not even thinking of the fact that like what he's doing is dark. You're just like, Josh, you silly little goose. And he ends up falling in love with our cat. The cat and Josh have this funny dynamic going on. He makes TikToks on mask talk thirst traps, and then he finds out that she used to be like friends with benefits with his roommate. And so after a couple of months of like, because she's a nurse, she's very busy, so she basically like ghosts the roommate for like months, and then all of a sudden she's like, man, I guess I haven't like gotten laid in a long time, maybe I should head up my friends with benefits. So she sees Josh, the MMC's TikTok, not realizing it's him. He's doing a mask talk thirst trap. She's obsessed with him. She's like, I wonder if my friends with benefits would do this with me. So she sends the TikTok to him, the friends with benefits, and she's like, would you be like down? And he's like, Allie, we haven't talked in months. Like, where have you been? And no, like, I'm not gonna chase you around in a mask. And so the roommate shows Josh, like, can you believe Allie did this? And Josh is like, hey, I've seen Allie, she's so hot. And like, oh my gosh, that's me. Hopefully my friend doesn't realize it's me. So then Josh is a computer whiz. So he goes and sees that she's commented on every single one of his videos. He's able to stalk her. He's able to find where she's at. And then he goes ahead and like makes a thirst trap in her room. And she's like, oh my gosh, that like, that's my like quilt. That could have been me. That could have been my room. And it's like, little does she know, like, it is. So very much highly recommend the audiobook for this. Like, just in general, I hear a lot of people that don't like dark romance listen to this and they like this. So very good. Okay, now we're gonna get a little bit actual, like, darker. Now that we've kind of like gotten themes without it being too heavy, now we get a little bit in. So the next one I would recommend is the Devil's Night series. So it starts with Corrupt by Penelope Douglas. It then will go Hideaway, Kill Switch, Conclave is a little novella to read in between, Nightfall, and then Fire Night will be the novella to read at the end. This is a series you have to read in order. It is not interconnected standalone. This is like, if you don't read this first, the rest is not going to make sense. I've heard people say they read them out of order and it works, but like, I mean, free will and everything, but I would not do that. So you start with Corrupt. It's basically about four guys that they wear masks, and the night before Halloween, it's called Devil's Night. They go out, they wreak havoc on the town. Like, the town knows it's them. It's a very, very wealthy town. Their parents are very wealthy players within the town. Nobody's actually ever gonna arrest them, even though they do. They do at the start of this book. So it's like, they always thought they were untouchable, and then all of a sudden they find out, like, something happened and they've been arrested, and now it's years in the future. So like, you're gonna read a little bit of them when they were a little younger, 2 years in the future, go a little bit back and forth in this book just to figure out like what the hell happened and kind of like set up the rest of the series. You're gonna end up hating one of the characters in this book tremendously. Actually, you're gonna hate many of them. I actually just hate the MMC, but whatever, to each his own. Mike Chris, gross to me. But the series is worth it. So you're gonna get a lot of information thrown at you in this first one. You're gonna be like, whoa, this was entertaining, but like, I'm curious as to why everybody's so obsessed. Then you're gonna get to Hideaway, and listen to me, it is slow. Like, it is so slow, and it's actually sad because the MMC in Hideaway is Kai, and I really loved Kai in Corrupt. But I feel like his book was more about Damon, which is the third book, like setting up Damon's book, than about Kai. And so I kind of regret that we didn't get enough of Kai. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just like, his book was boring when it should have been probably like one of the hottest ones. Like, I feel like Kai just has that like quiet thing about him that it could have been really good. But we were so focused on Damon that I think it took away from Kai's like development. Be okay with that. Just like, understand that's part of the process. Is Hideaway is going to be slower, because Kill Switch is my all-time favorite book in that series. I have never seen a character that we get so, like, you hate, you loathe so much. The author, Uno, reverses you so bad and goes, you love him now, okay? And maybe you won't, I don't know. Maybe you're like, F it, 10 toes down, still hate him, and that's fine. But then you need to go to Nightfall, because then we get Will's book, and Will is just precious baby. So like, all of these are going to be dark. You are going to see a lot of dark things, but not, I've seen much worse. Okay, so like, the plot is there. There's good spice, but it takes a while. Like, this one is more plot driven with dark themes. Again, it kind of helps balancing it out. Like, if you're going to be dark, be funny. If you're going to be dark, have a plot, like, as someone starting out, because otherwise when you get to those dark books that's just dark and spicy, or just kind of like mind F, like, you're not ready for that. So highly recommend that series to anybody, even if you're not new to dark romance, still highly recommend. Okay, if you want to do Mafia, I love the Made Men series by Danielle Laurie. I'm currently doing Mafia in March, so I'm going to have like a whole video just on Mafia romance that I'm going to have to do by the end of the month, because I have so many more recs now. But this was my first Mafia romance series. It starts with The Sweetest Oblivion, then The Maddest Obsession, then The Darkest Temptation. The Darkest Temptation is my favorite. This one is following like Italian Mafia. There's the MMC is kind of arranged to marry the FMC's sister, but then there's kind of like a switcheroo that has to happen, and now she's being forced to marry him, but they have much better banter. Like, they have like, but he hates her. Like, they hate each other. So like, the banter is not like light and fluffy like these other ones I was talking about. They're more like sass and like spitfire. Like, he at some point burns down a gas station just because somebody like hit on his girl.
That's love!
Like, that's not what we're talking about. Like, mafia, like, I'm pretty sure somebody gets shot in the head at, like, page 30. Like, but the plot is good. Like, the lines are good. So, again, like, highly recommend. Themes are darker, but without being, there's no, like, at least I don't think, like, he doesn't kidnap her or stalk her or anything in that book. So, like, not as bad. But, like, highly, highly recommend this series. Absolutely love it. Okay. Now we're gonna get like a little darker without being like crazy. Okay, we have the last two I have are H.G. Carlton. So H.G. Carlton writes dark romance. Just know that, like, that's her style. That will always be her style. Shallow River, I don't think it's talked about enough. This one's gonna be a more domestic violence situation where the FMC is in a relationship with a man that is horrible to her, and she's kind of stuck in that situation, or thinks she deserves to be stuck in that situation because she grew up very poor. Like, her mom kind of sells herself to get her drugs and everything like that. But she ends up meeting or like kind of connecting with her boyfriend's brother or fiance's brother, and they kind of like start meeting secretly and just a shoulder to lean on, like, kind of thing. And they end up growing their relationship, and then essentially it gets to a point where like a decision has to be made, and so the dark the ending of this book is dark. This is the book that you say she got what a lot of DV victims or victims in general deserve. Like, she got the revenge a lot of us deserve that we'll never get. So like, this one's empowering. Like, the darkness is outside of the relationship, but it is dark. Like, it definitely starts to get into themes of like, that was a little gory, but there was reason, there was purpose. Like, I get why. Hell yeah. You know what I mean? So get there. And then the last one, this was actually the first one I gave my husband to read as a dark romance novel, because again, it's like unhinged, but then the plot is plotting in this one. So you get a woman that she travels a lot because she is stealing identities. That's what she does. That's just how she survives. And she shows up in Australia, and she's at a bar, and her and this guy like kind of hit it off, and they just like hit it off right off the bat. Like, page 20, like,
That's what she said.
the waterfall scene, love it. But she needs another identity to steal, so she takes his identity. And so he finds out, and then he sees her walking on the beach one day, and he says, hey, like he's trying to get back at her, but like pretends like he doesn't know. And he's like, hey, like, would you like to come out on my boat? Like, cause he studies sharks, that's what he does. And she's like, okay. And so he takes her out on the boat, and then like all hell breaks loose. Like, he gets his revenge on her, but then like a crazy storm hits, and like now they have to spend the rest of the book like trying to figure shit out. And then the ending is dark again outside of their romance, but the whole time they're in this book like hating each other. So it's enemies to lovers, and then they kind of come together, and like there's a creepy lighthouse guy. They get shipwrecked. It's like intense. So like, highly recommend this book from the plot standpoint, but there are dark themes, and you're gonna be like, what's it? The shark scene?
Oh my God, what is that?
Like, what did I just read? But everyone talks about the shark scene, but it is like 2 pages, and then the rest is just straight like really crazy plot. So like, again, another situation where I think we set ourselves up for failure, because this is such a great book, but when you only talk about one scene that's completely unhinged, people are like, you guys are weird. Like, we're not weird. We're not weird, okay? Nobody's weird. We just are like, what? Like, I read that, that's crazy. But the book is so good. So, that's Does It Hurt by H.G. Carlton. So, again, how long have we been here? Welcome to the Yap Sesh, but that's a ton of books. And if you tell me that you read them all, I don't know what to say, then you are no longer a beginner of dark romance. And I can do a whole nother video for you on like how we get a little bit crazier than that. So, as a reminder, like, if you're watching this and you like dark romance, maybe pump the brakes of throwing people in the deep end. It works for some, not for most. But if you do read any of these books, let me know if you like them. Let me know if you kind of make sense as to why people read these. And if you read them and you don't like that, that's perfectly fine too. Like, nobody, like, I get it. Like, no harm, no foul on not liking these books. Just let me know what types of books you like, because I love all genres. Like, I'm a hockey romance girl. I am a cowboy romance girl. I am now a fantasy girl. Like, I like laughing. I love crying. Oh my gosh, I could do a whole video on just books that have made me emotionally sob, where my husband's like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, because I'm having a good time. So even though I'm just after dark, like, I read all genres. I love, everybody is equally accepted here. So if you want any recs on just different stuff, let me know. I could definitely do that. But in the meantime, thank you guys for sitting here and yapping with me as I go through some of my favorite books. And I will see you next time.